Good evening, and what a pleasure it is to be in this beautiful space for such a memorable event. Tonight's affair is being co-sponsored by the WVU Humanities Center and the Leadership Studies program within the Everly College of Arts and Sciences. I'm Lisa DeFrank Cole, Professor and Director of Leadership Studies, and I welcome all of you from near and far for the book launch of Hungry Town, a novel by Mr. Jason Kapcala. I first met Jason through a mutual friend and writer, Renee Nicholson, about 8 years ago. I admired their friendship and the way they supported each other in their writing endeavors. Over time, I was able to speak with Jason in longer conversations and learned of his interest in the academic field of leadership. And more importantly, his love of writing. In 2019, he was in the first class of students to begin pursuing the graduate certificate in leadership. And last December, he was in the inaugural graduating class. Having earned an MFA earlier in his career, he wanted additional knowledge. As he was pursuing this new credential, we had a need for a part-time lecturer in the undergraduate program. I felt like I hit the lottery having someone with Jason's education and teaching experience working with our leadership studies students. He has taught regularly and is a valued colleague and member of our team. Jason's full-time job is as the Assistant Director of WVU's Accessibility Services. And of course, his passion is writing. Jason is the author of the short story collection, North to Lakeville, and the novel Hungry Town, which we officially launch with tonight's reading. Jason grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, not far from the ruins of the Bethlehem Steel Works, which I understand had a big influence on this novel. One of the reasons I enjoy Jason's book so much is because I am also from Pennsylvania and revel in the stories about the industries that connect his hometown with mine, those of coal and steel, which also transcend the borders of West Virginia and throughout Appalachia. Reading his work, it is clear that he understands the impact of these industries, not only on the economy, but also on the landscape which they inhabit and on the people they employ. He captures the essence of those who work near these industries through his character development, something that comes from close observation. I am so delighted to introduce the author, a colleague, and my friend tonight, and I look forward to hearing a reading from his novel. Please join me in welcoming Jason Kapcala and Hungry Town.
Thank you, Lisa. That was a very kind introduction, and I'm also very appreciative. As a graduate of the Leadership Studies certificate program here at WVU, can't think of anyone I'd rather have sponsor the launch of my first novel. And if you're a WVU student watching this tonight, Leadership Studies is a wonderful program and it's worth checking out. And I'll talk a little bit about leadership here in a moment. But first, thank you to everyone who's come out tonight to celebrate the launch of Hungry Town. Whether you're in person or out there on Zoom, I truly appreciate your support. I'm especially grateful to my mom who traveled a long way to be here tonight. Also, a special thank you to the Humanities Center for co-sponsoring this event. We have such a strong Humanities Center here at WVU, and there's so much important interdisciplinary collaboration happening and coming out of the center this year. If you haven't been tuning in regularly, then you're definitely missing out on some exceptional programming. And I'm really proud to be a small part of that. I've actually known the Humanities Center Director, Renee Nicholson, for many years. By the way, she also has a great book out on WVU Press, Fierce and Delicate. And I happen to know that she's going to be reading from it this Wednesday, sponsored by the Women's Leadership Initiative here at WVU. And I believe you're pulling double duty in introducing that one as well, right, Lisa? Yeah. I know she won't promote it herself, but it is in the Mountaineer Room of the Mountain there at 6 p.m. on Wednesday. And that's one you don't want to miss. It's Renee's a fantastic reader and it's a fantastic memoir. When I first mentioned to Renee that I was writing this book, in part about a police officer who opens a hot dog stand, she said to me, "We need to go to some hot dog stands and do some research." Now, I grew up 30 minutes from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and Lehigh Valley, where there are many, many hot dog stands. And I've been eating at hot dog stands my entire life, in case you can't tell. And so if there's one thing in this world that I don't need to do additional research on, it's hot dogs. But I like hot dogs. And so I figured who might argue, right? I think we went to pretty much every hot dog stand in North Central West Virginia. And on one of those excursions, I got this beauty, which I'm excited to share with you. In case you can't read that, it says, "You'll relish the flavor." About right. Incidentally, that's what I wanted the subtitle of the novel to say. Hungry Town, you'll relish the flavor. And the press was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Which was probably for the best. So what's the moral of this little story? Well, first, if you write a novel about hot dogs and you tell Renee, then she'll buy you lunch, and then you'll have enough money left over that you can buy a cool sign like this one. And second, I know we have some writers who are joining us on Zoom from the writing programs at my alma maters, Penn State and Ohio University. And what I would say to you as writers is this: don't ever underestimate the importance of having close writing colleagues and friends. It really does make a difference in what can otherwise be a lonely pursuit. Before I go on, I'm going to move this beauty of a sign because it's resting against my foot. It's going to drive me nuts for the remainder of this reading. So go ahead and put it right here. All right. So I'm actually not going to read the hot dog sections of the book tonight. Tonight's launch is going to be a bit unconventional, though. Leadership Studies has been so gracious as to host this event. And I know there are leadership studies students watching this, some of my former students, in fact, and I promised I would give a shout out. So this is me doing that. I'm actually going to spend a little bit of time connecting this reading to the concepts that you'll be studying in your leadership classes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Hungry Town, or leadership in Hungry Town first, and then I'll do a bit of reading, and then we'll have a Q&A in the time remaining. Hungry Town was long in the making, and I finished it prior to ever joining the Leadership Studies program, and so leadership theory wasn't exactly on my mind while I was writing. In fact, when I write fiction, my approach is pretty simple. I try to follow the characters, and I try to understand them to the best of my ability, well enough that a reader can connect with them in some meaningful way. That's it. And I believe that when a character's experience differs from a reader's, it forces the reader to imagine that character's suffering, and that builds empathy. And conversely, when a reader identifies strongly with a character's lived experience, that can help a reader to feel less lonely. And those are my only real aspirations for writing. However, thanks to the Leadership Studies program, I can look back on this novel through a different lens and with a new language that allows me to articulate things that I hadn't considered previously while I was writing. Law enforcement stories hold a special place in the American literary mythos. The perceived inherent drama of a police officer's job, the righteous meting out of justice, forms a kind of wish fulfillment where, at least on the page or on the screen, good guys always triumph over bad. Cinematically and literarily, we may find ourselves cheering on anti-heroes. The Dirty Harrys, the Murtaughs and Riggses, all those bad boys, what you gonna do? We know that while their methods may be unorthodox, even illegal, their innate sense of right and wrong remains intact on some higher moral plane. Sure, they may bend or break a few rules to apprehend the criminal, but in these stories, the ends always justify the means, and often there's something satisfying about bypassing the bureaucratic BS, the imperfect system where legal and illegal aren't always synonymous with right and wrong. These anti-hero cops are going to get the right man in the end, a bad man for whom we feel no remorse, the kind of guy who's got it coming. And for 120 minutes or 280 pages, that's all that matters. I want to be clear, that's suspension of disbelief to the highest order, and we're wise to remember it. In Hungry Town, Stephanie Rue and Harry Mulqueen are police officers in the fictional Rust Belt town of Lodi, Ohio. Rue is the only woman on Lodi's police force. She's been on the job 22 years, and she's become something of a unicorn in the local law enforcement community. Two-time Ohio Officer of the Year, Purple Heart recipient, she was practically a legend, and he'd heard all the stories. How, on her very first night on the beat, she'd followed a bridge jumper over the side into the biting Manhattan. How she'd broken up a bar fight and dragged the assailant in for booking, his flip knife still sticking from her palm. How she'd obeyed a direct order, sneaking into Lodi High School alone, without backup, talking down a disturbed kid who held his class at gunpoint. She'd been no older than he was now, and Mulqueen couldn't help but wonder what he might have done in the same situation. Probably not that. Rumor was, after that last one, they'd presented her commendation for bravery with a sanction for disobeying orders stapled to it, just in case she'd forgotten how brightly the top brass shone. Despite being a senior officer and an emergent leader, and despite garnering a number of impressive accolades while outperforming her male peers, Rue has not advanced in her career as one might expect. She remains a beat cop, stuck working the late night dog shifts, navigating a professional labyrinth, pushing up on the glass ceiling, and eventually standing alone at the edge of a glass cliff. And for those who don't know, glass cliff is an organizational psychology term. It's used to describe the phenomenon where when they're disproportionately thrust into leadership positions during times of chaos and are set up to fail so that they can be scapegoated down the road when things inevitably fall apart. In Rue's case, her heroic moments are eagerly celebrated by her department, even as her daily virtue holds her back from advancement. Leadership Studies professor Craig E. Johnson actually talks about this, the difference between highly visible moral episodes and subtle moral processes. And Johnson says, dramatic acts such as rescuing a child from danger or saving someone from a burning house capture our attention. However, if we are to develop worthy character, we need examples of those who demonstrate virtue on a daily basis. And I would add that these mundane moral processes are more essential than the heroic acts when it comes to the sustainability of an ethical system. And they define Rue's authentic leadership approach. They're the reason her junior partner, Mulqueen, looks up to her as a mentor, for instance. So let me set the scene for you. One night, Rue and Mulqueen respond to a silent alarm at the abandoned Lodi steel plant. And when they get there, another cop, Ed Lewis, is already on the scene. Lewis is an old school cop in all the worst ways. Lewis was a gas bag, a dinosaur. He told too many stories about the old days, spent too much time pissing and moaning about his arthritic hands, his aching knees, the way kids wore their pants today, their hair. Rude served with dozens of good old boys just like him. Hell, the entire force had been full of Ed Lewis's when she started. It was one of the reasons why she was coming up on retirement, yet still riding in a prowler, responding to grab calls. When the three cops enter the machine shop, they discover teenagers, Rodney Peach and Shay Counterman, having sex. They also discover Rodney's 8-year-old brother Stanley, who's being forced to take pornographic photos of him using a stolen camera. The scene becomes violent when Ed Lewis overreacts and throws Rodney in a chokehold. Rue is eventually able to pull Lewis off, and Rodney makes a break for it, and Mulqueen winds up chasing him deeper into the mill. In the end, Rodney hurls himself through a window to escape the police, badly miscalculating the outcome. That first chapter sets off the events for the rest of the novel. Rue and Mulqueen struggle to make sense of their lives in the aftermath of this tragedy, and young Stanley Peach finds himself alone, having to fend for himself in the hard-scrabble neighborhood where he lives. He's used to doing whatever Rodney tells him, and while Rodney wasn't a very nice older brother to Stanley, he at least kept the wolves at bay. There's also a fourth protagonist, Darla, who has her own thread. She's on the run from her grifter ex-boyfriend, and she's trying to figure out if Lodi is a waypoint or a destination for her. But we're going to pick up with Rue and Mulqueen in chapter 3, the part I'm reading tonight. I chose this chapter because it provides examples of leadership, both formal and informal. Rue and Mulqueen are at the station house after the incident in the mill, and they've been called in to meet with the chief, Mike Holbrook. Now, getting dressed down by the chief is sort of a common scene in buddy cop movies, and it's more often than not played for laughs. However, there's nothing funny about it in this case. As you'll see, Holbrook is an example of someone with positional authority, but he's not an effectual leader. He's a clean cop, meticulous and expedient, political in both his ambitions and his approach to conflict. But though he harbors a sense of right and wrong, his convictions are malleable compared to Rue's and Mulqueen's. And at one point, Mulqueen muses that the chief might even have been a good cop at one time, but that he's become a bureaucrat. Holbrook deserves some credit for cleaning up the more obvious ethical violations that were occurring in the department many years back when he first became chief. Those slam dunk cases that couldn't otherwise be ignored. However, since then, he's become inured to the deep-seated culture of systemic dysfunction around him. And he's not a strong enough transformational role model to counter the toxic, informal leadership of the old guard, veteran officers like Ed Lewis. If placed on the Blake Mouton managerial grid, which is a tool commonly used for categorizing management style, Holbrook would be, at best, a middle-of-the-road manager. He supports his people to a degree, and he cares enough about professionalism to chew out officers over things like their attire or sloppy paperwork. But his middle ground leadership style does not inspire change. It hinges on tendering favor, avoiding controversy, managing public perception, soft-pedaling disagreement, and swallowing convictions in the name of progress. Unfortunately, the progress that he protects is actually just the status quo. He does not, for instance, reform the culture of his department or sponsor leadership opportunities for an exceptional marginalized officer, minoritized officer, such as Rue. By contrast, Rue and Mulqueen are clear about the thin blue line and where they stand regarding LPD's workplace culture. They recognize the personal and professional sacrifice that comes with having deep convictions in a department where having convictions, deep or otherwise, is rare and risky. This provides Rue with enough perspective to step back and assess the state of Lodi's law enforcement apparatus. How many crooked cops that you've been warned about on our way up? How many macho power trippers who got off on rousting kids and minorities, picking on the poor? Old boys just retiring on duty. Before Holbrook tidied up the place, how many shakedowns had occurred? How many corners cut just because a cop didn't like the way someone looked or talked or dressed? Not so many. Far too many? Sides of the same coin. In the end, Holbrook hadn't cleaned things up that much. Someday, it'll catch up with all of us, Rue thought. And when that day comes, who pays the debt? We'll take a look at that question here with chapter 3. Rue and Mulqueen. They stood at the broken window, Rue and Mulqueen, staring down at the body of Rodney Peach. Behind them, the machine shop buzzed alive for the first time in 30 years. Only now, it wasn't the lathes and grinders and milling machines, but the echoes of a crime scene. Rue lit Mulqueen's cigarette with a butt of her own and watched forensics comb the yard for evidence the rain hadn't washed away. A camera flashed. Something small and tight gripped her stomach like a baby's fist. Tragedies, especially ones involving kids, made her feel old. This is bad, Mulqueen said, and Rue reached over and squeezed his hand. Below, the twists of rebar ran slick, rainwater pooling darkly under the spotlights. The men lost their grip on the body, its arms splaying as it slid toward the base of the slag heap. Mulqueen grabbed the hair at the base of his skull. I think I'm going to be sick. One of the technicians called for a gurney, and Rue took the cigarette from Mulqueen's lips, gently crushing it underfoot before leading him away. Out front, the other officers avoided eye contact. Along the side of the machine shop, in the fat shadows of the blast furnaces, the sky grew depthless like the inside of a coke oven. Something big was building off in the west. Rue and Mulqueen ducked behind the brick building to get out of the wind and found the district sergeant, Simmons, hunkered against the wall. 143, he said. That's the number of violent crimes in Lodi this year. At least that was the count yesterday. That's more than we had all last year. And now this, like I needed this tonight. He lit a cigarette, the butt glowing red as he inhaled. Where's Lewis? Rue said. EMTs took him, shortness of breath. You really did a number on him. Mulqueen shook his head. He's full of shit. Let me worry about Lewis, Simmons said. He beckoned with his hand, and Rue and Mulqueen gave a perfunctory account of Rodney Peach's last moments. I don't know what the hell to make of that, Simmons said finally. He tilted his head, as though the answer were written above them in the bituminous dark. Guess I should arrange for separate transport back to the station house, just in case. Rue craned her neck. In case what? Come on, Rue, Simmons said. A pair of EMTs rounded the corner, pushing a white sheet on a gurney. Somewhere downwind, a girl screamed something hysterical. Mulqueen turned in time to see an officer push Shay Counterman's head down into the backseat of a cruiser. That kid's death was a fucking accident, Rue said, and Mulqueen noticed she was worrying her ring again. You want to know how things went sideways? Head over to county and talk to Officer Windbag. Choose your words carefully, Rue. Simmons jabbed his cigarette at her. Lewis is a decorated senior officer. And what am I? Rue said, jabbing her finger right back at him. Simmons held his palms out in surrender. A few blocks from here, someone from the department is telling a woman that her son is dead, asking if she can come down to the morgue to identify his body. And the ground was being torn out from under her, Mulqueen thought. Simmons gestured at nothing in particular. You know, once upon a time, this place spat out 1 million tons of pig iron a year. Now what good's it? The officer who drove Rue back to the station house was young and excited, but it took Rue less than a block to shut him up. She watched the side view mirror as they drove, thought about Mulqueen sitting passenger side in the trailing cruiser, not quite partner, not quite suspect. She thought, they're going to want us to corroborate whatever story makes the department look best. Outside, the gutted factories gave way to the ramshackle quarters of Second Ward, the neighborhood that had once belonged to sand rats and immigrants, but now belonged to those people in Lodi who couldn't afford to live anywhere else. Soot coated the homes, 3-story Irish battleships and seedy cold water flats, places where Lodi's growing population of meth junkies and curb creatures went to die. The cruisers crossed over the Manhattan and turned onto Riverside. In the lead car, Rue turned away from the window. Her driver must have sensed her restlessness because he said, "Hell of a night." Rue leaned her head back against the seat. Whether that was supposed to be comforting or not, she didn't know. Mulqueen could tell a lot about people by observing the places where they worked. Holbrook's office was cramped and dimly lit, but it was also meticulous. On the desktop, a gooseneck lamp, a gilded pen set, pictures of the chief's kids, a girl in some sort of Irish dance costume, and a boy wearing a Pop Warner football helmet. His academy diploma hung on one wall. An early surveyor's map of Lodi with yellowed edges covered the other. Filing cabinets lined the back like sentries, permanent record of every bad decision. If the chief had made the trip in from home at this hour, it could only mean that Rodney Peach's death had major shitstorm written all over it. For God's sake, Harry, sit down. Holbrook rubbed his forehead, held his palm up in an almost helpless gesture, and Mulqueen slumped in his chair. You know the general order, Mulqueen. I have to follow certain guidelines. Holbrook leaned forward. The kid just jumped. What did Lewis say? Lewis is staying in the hospital overnight for monitoring. You'll be glad to know it's just precautionary. Mulqueen leaned back in his chair. Yeah, I was beside myself with worry. He pulled down the sleeves of his jacket and then tore it off in a spastic, frustrated gesture. Holbrook watched him. Harry, what I'm saying is, you weren't acting under color of law. There wasn't any use of force. What do you call that hammerlock Lewis threw at the kid? Holbrook tapped his pen against his desk pad. Once child services arrives, detectives will take statements. A forbidden chokehold last I checked, Mulqueen said, after what happened to that kid in Cleveland. 2 months ago, Harry. Lewis has been on the force longer than you and Rue combined. He's subdued suspects more times than either of us can count. I guess that makes it fine then. Holbrook stopped tapping. No, he said, not fine. The public is going to lose their heads. It's going to be a PR nightmare. And police community relations are thin to begin with. Mulqueen screwed up his face in disgust. The world has changed, Harry. Have you watched the news lately? We've got gun nuts down in Florida playing wannabe cop, church shootings in Carolina, school shootings everywhere else, cops mistaking their Glocks for tasers, cops blasting people in their own apartments, Leos executed in their patrol cars, protests in Missouri, protests in Baltimore, NRA, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, about 100 fucked up incidents coast to coast. All eyes are on us right now. Well, maybe we ought to start releasing our own instead of handing out get-out-of-jail-free cards for Tombstone Courage, Mulqueen said. You act like Lewis is the only person who stands to lose from this, Harry, but in case you forget, you were there too, and so was Rue. Mulqueen stared down at his hands. Rue didn't do anything wrong. Maybe not, But out there in cyberspace, it's guilty till proven innocent, guilty by association. When something like this happens, every righteously indignant jackass has blogged it, reblogged it, posted it to their Facebook wall before the body's even cold. Well, Queen fiddled with a paperclip on the end of the desk. Who gives a fuck about Facebook? Only every breathing person on the planet, Harry. Well, Queen tossed the paperclip onto the desk and it bounced toward the chief. Both men stared at it. Holbrook's voice grew soft. I've asked Kulwicki to conduct the interviews. Mulqueen looked up. As in Edmund Lewis's ex-partner, Kulwicki, that Kulwicki. We're a regional department, Harry. We've got 2 detectives and 36 patrol officers, 34 without you in room. Who would you have run the investigation? You're throwing us to the wolves, Mike, and you know it. I'll be present. We'll send the investigation packet to the DA's office and a shoot board of review. And when they find no fault, this will still have a happy ending, Mulqueen squeezed the muscles at the back of his neck. For whom exactly? For all of us, Holbrook said. Take a few days of administrative leave, use some vacation time, clear your head, go fishing. Mulqueen pictured the boy, his body twitching. I don't fish. Then learn, Harry. Do you want my badge and gun? Mulqueen said. I want you to go home and get some rest. Mulqueen rose from his chair, grabbed his jacket. Send Rue in. And Harry, take care of yourself, okay? Talk with a professional. Get a handle on this. Out in the sterile electric hum of the division headquarters, Mulqueen cleared the junk from his desk with a sweep of his hand. He punched his arms through the sleeves of his jacket. Kulwicki leaned against the edge of his desk and sat with his back to Mulqueen, staring out toward the interrogation rooms with their one-way mirrors. I saw a guy do a swan dive out a 4th-story window once. I don't know why these schmozzles always assume they can fly. He sipped his coffee from an embossed LPD mug. I suppose 2 out of 3 ain't half bad. He watched Rue repin her hair and took a long sip. The corners of his mouth twitched. Not half bad. Mulqueen leaned forward. Get off my desk. Kulwicki looked up from his coffee, head cocked as though to say, what, that's supposed to scare me? Still, he turned to leave, almost running into Rue. Isn't it past your bedtime, Stringbean? She said, knocking the cup from Kulwicki's hands. Kulwicki jumped back, spreading his arms in a what gives gesture. Don't be a bitch, Rue. You say that like it's a bad thing, Rue said. Time to move along. She tossed her jacket onto the desk, toppling a stack of case files. Maybe go visit your old pal Lewis. Kulwicki shrugged. I wouldn't worry about Ed. Too many hot dogs. Then go visit someone else, Rue said, stretching her arms over her head. Her unbuttoned uniform shirt hung open, revealing a white tank top. Kulwicki leered. He took a step toward her, but she didn't budge. What do we say, Stringbean? Kulwicki rolled his eyes. May I please vacate this shithole you call an office? Rue swung to the side, and as he passed, Kulwicki whispered, You'd better think about being nice to me, Rue. If not for the wet slurp of tires on pavement, the ride to Mulqueen's apartment would have been silent. While Rue drove, Mulqueen traced raindrops on the passenger window with his thumbnail, watching one droplet intersect with the next until the two were indistinguishable. 1 minute you're minding your own business, he thought. The next, You're crashing headfirst into someone else. Hit hard enough, and you might just fuse. He struck the dashboard with the heel of his hand, and Rue looked over. At a crossbuck, they stopped for the passing of the night's last freight train, the serpentine line of coal cars clacking as it crossed the iron trellis to the south side of the river. Across the water, the yellow spotlights were still visible. The engine disappeared into the woods with a ghostly foghorn blast, and Mulqueen said, "So what now?" "There'll be an investigation." The side of Rue's face flashed green in the light of the blinker. "When they clear us, we return to active duty." Mulqueen reached over and fiddled with the heat, and Rue noticed his hand trembled. "That's not what I meant," he said. He stared at the side of her face, eyes fixed on a coil of black hair that had come loose from the bun behind her head. Ask me if I think that boy would still be alive tonight if Lewis hadn't grabbed him. Ask me if that kid would still be here had I not given chase. You have no way of knowing that." "Go on," Mulqueen said. "Ask me." Rue didn't know what else to say. She'd stood beside him at the broken machine shop window. She'd squeezed his hand, lit his cigarette, but the worst was yet to come from Mulqueen, for all of them. They merged on State Route 519 with the blast furnaces to their backs. Mulqueen slid his shoes on the waxy fast food wrappers and nicotine gum boxes that littered the car floor. He said, "They're looking at you too, you know. They've been looking at me for 22 years. And that doesn't bother you?" When she didn't answer, Mulqueen turned back to the window. Why'd the damn kid have to run? Rue tensed her jaw. She knew why the kid ran. In Lodi, everyone ran. Thank you. So I think we have some time for Q&A maybe. If anybody has questions or if anyone wants to stick around, there's refreshments, and happy to sign books or just chat with folks.
Why a police story for this
novel? So the question was why a police story for the novel? It's actually something that I had kind of started playing around with. I mean, maybe even back when I was in high school or something. I just had these characters in mind. You know, I used to like watching kind of cop movies and stuff like that. And kind of, you know, you write what you're interested in at the time, and you know, then you kind of grow up and you start thinking about those movies. And I still, you know, they're enjoyable sometimes, but I wanted to kind of take the tropes from them and turn them on their head. You know, and so if you think of like, I don't know, Dirty Harry or something, it's always like Dirty Harry is like the tough, grizzled veteran cop or something, and then he gets saddled with some minority, it's a woman or a racial minority or something like that. And at first there's like friction because this person has ideas that are kind of more modern than the grizzled cop's ideas and stuff, and then the grizzled cop kind of comes to appreciate the other person is in fact a good cop or something like that. It's kind of the story and the trope, and it gets repeated over and over again. And I kind of wanted to do something, you know, with this where I took the tropes but turned them on their head a little bit. So I kind of, you know, having the tough, experienced, somewhat jaded cop be, you know, a woman, and then have the cop who is sort of the sensitive, deep thinker or something be, you know, her junior partner who's a man. And I don't know if we get that really in this section that I read tonight, but Harry's kind of a collector of esoteric knowledge, and he's interested in philosophy and all of these other kinds of things that kind of make him, you know, different from, you know, the traditional kind of like tough guy or something like that. So I think it just kind of chose me initially because that was my interest, and then I kind of grew up as I grew up as well. You know, just finally kind of got to a place where I could write I think the story that I wanted to write. Great question.
Can you speak a little bit about, in this book, there are so many awesome, really badass women characters. And as a male writer, I was reading this, and unlike many contemporary books I read, I did not become hostile.
Oh, that's
And
good.
because these are the most amazing characterizations, portrayals of female protagonists, and there's more than one that are just incredible. Can you speak to a little bit about how you form your characters, especially when writing for women?
I can try. Yeah, that's a great question. The question was sort of to, in a nutshell, like how do I, as a male writer, write about women, and do it in a way that doesn't make anyone hostile. I mean, I have a lot of strong women in my life. First of all, a lot of my friends are women, and people I look up to are women. My mom and everybody else, and so I have to write that way, or else I get in trouble. But also, I mean, I don't know that there's a trick to it per se. I think I just try to like. I think the problem is that maybe the people write women or other minoritized groups, in ways that are dramatically different from the characters that they're most comfortable with, or something like that. And so, I mean, I think I just tried to write a character who's fully fleshed out, who isn't an object of. I mean, Rue is an object of Moat Queen's desire in the book, but she's not like he isn't sitting there like ogling her every page, and she's not like, when she looks at herself in the mirror, she's like checking out the scars that she got from that day on the job, not like talking about the size of the breast or something like that, which I think is what usually gets kind of lampooned by like bad writing by men when they try to write women or something. So I think I just kind of tried to write the character kind of consistently with the values of the rest of the characters, and just try to make her seem fully rounded and fleshed out, and imagine myself in that character like anybody else. I mean, that's not a great answer, I don't think there was really I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, other than I did, try to gut check myself in a couple of places, make sure I wasn't doing things that were, gonna be off-putting. There was some revision that I did at the very last stages. I got some feedback from one of my readers who had said, that there was one scene in particular where it just sort of felt like, Rue's husband in the book kind of gets away with doing some things that are saying some things that he'd never get away with doing, kind of undermined her character. And it was a great bit of feedback, and so it was one of the last things I changed about the book. It was more of a spot correction than I think overall. A spot correction, but it does, of course, any kind of little breaks in the world that you've created have the potential of undermining the character. So it was a much appreciated suggestion. Thank you. That's a great question.
So we have a comment from the chat. This is from Mackenzie Hall. Congratulations on this accomplishment, Professor Kapcala. I've had the pleasure to be one of your students as well as your TA. I have learned so much about leadership through you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and gift to write with us.
Thanks, Mackenzie. I hope you're doing well. Mackenzie is a great student and a fantastic TA. Excellent. It's exciting to know that you're out there in the audience. Any other questions before we wrap up? Yeah.
So what was your intent when you included real world events, such as you gave a nod to the George Floyd and then, the all those things, right? So what was your intent when you included those in the fiction?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So when I kind of wrote this the first time, was a product of it. I mean, so this is like 10 years ago that I wrote the first draft of this. So I take a long time to kind of finish and publish books and stuff. And so at that time, I'm not sure that some of those things were as much on the kind of mainstream public consciousness. And it certainly, I mean, it was a product of a naiver me and probably a naiver kind of at least mainstream world or something. And as time passed and as these incidents gained, increasing visibility and things like that, and more of them happened, I started to feel like the book was becoming anachronistic or something, where it was like it wasn't even addressing these things. And so now, 10 years after I wrote it the first time, it's like, well, where's the mention of George Floyd, or where's the mention of Black Lives Matter? And you write a book about police and not have those things in there. And I actually started getting really worried that it was going to read as like propaganda or something, where it was like I was intentionally writing a backlash against them and like conspicuously leaving those things out or something in a kind of anti like Black Lives Matter or something like that, which is definitely not, I support Black Lives Matter, so that was not my intention. And I started thinking like maybe this book just doesn't need to be published at all. It was actually Renee who said like, well, you should send it out one more, send it out one more time. And I sent it out and I sent it to the press, and I think I was kind of, I don't know if they knew what to do with my initial email. I was kind of like, here's this book, you might be interested in it, but I'm really nervous about it being published because of the cop stuff going on. And they were like, well, we'll have the readers look at that in particular and comment on it. But one of the things, and the readers came back and didn't find it to be that way. But one of the things that I had kind of done by including some of those in the later revisions was both to acknowledge them first of all. And I don't, it's not a book where it was ever going to be a book with an axe to grind in that way. Like I wasn't wanting to write like a thinly veiled treatise on anything, but I think organically, like Rue and Mulqueen are good cops and they're good people, and they're in a department full of corruption and things like that. And so I think it made sense to start kind of addressing those things and situating this book within real life so that it didn't feel like some of those like things I mentioned in the first, like the little intro speech that I gave, like Bad Boys or Lethal Weapon or something like that. That was kind of my intention with it. Thank you. Good
So
question.
another question from the chat. This is from Trevor Swigger. I know you mentioned middle ground leadership styles in the early chapters and in the character development, but are there other leadership studies theories implemented in other parts of the novel that you drew from? And then also, great job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's like theories that I drew from, because again, I kind of didn't think of it in those terms when I was writing it. Like I wasn't sitting down going like, okay, this person is this sort of leader and I'm going to depict them that way. I didn't even know leadership styles at that time. I hadn't gone through the program and stuff. So a lot of kind of what I'm talking about now is me looking back and doing a critical analysis kind of the book, which I hate it when authors do that, but I wanted to do something that connected it to what the students in leadership studies might be looking at. But I think, certainly, you can look at Rue as being a very authentic leader. You can look at her as being an emergent leader, possibly even transformational leader, at least insofar as her kind of public notoriety and her influence over Mulqueen as her partner. At one point, she kind of, I don't want to talk too much about the plot of it because someone may actually want to read it or something, but at one point she kind of muses that Mulqueen was supposed to be like the best of them. Mulqueen she was grooming Mulqueen to be her replacement. And so I think there's definitely leadership there. And I think if you really wanted to turn the lens, you could look at kind of any characters. You could look at Primo and Lucky, who are a couple of brothers who appear later in the book, and they're kind of low-level like thugs who've been hired to bring back and kidnap the character of Darla. And, there's definitely a dynamic between those two brothers. One is certainly the leader of the two of them. And so I think there's plenty of places where you could apply, different leadership styles and say, yeah, it could be this kind of leadership or that kind of leadership. But kind of the neat thing about leadership stuff, theory and stuff in general is that you never really just have one leadership style that anyone adopts. You kind of look at people and kind of using your mind and your creativity and your thinking, to sort of say, well, I could see this person being this kind of leader, or I could see them being that kind of leader. So I think there's a lot of ways that could be applied, but none of it was really the intent in the initial draft, or even in the revision of it. Just as I think about it now, that I sort of been able to observe it, say a few words about it. Thank you.
So this is a question for me. Tell us a little bit about the new book that you're writing, so I can figure out where we're going to be having lunch.
The new book. So, yeah, the new book I'm working on is it's called Morning Afters. Morning Afters spelled with a U, like morning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. And it's about a rock band that is from a ghost town in Pennsylvania, kind of loosely based on Centralia, PA. Totally different kind of book, kind of a comic, epic kind of book. It's sort of about a character who he left the band a long time ago when they were, kind of trying to make it big, and went off to California himself and took like their one good opportunity, or the one good lead, and tried to make a career for himself as a solo artist, and it didn't work out. Now he's gotten a call from his old bandmate and friend, who has informed him that one of the members of the band has overdosed and died, and so he has to come back to this town that he hoped he would never see again, which isn't even really a town anymore. It's sort of this sinkhole, and it kind of makes sense of that. And of course, he comes back, and his ex-girlfriend, who was also in the band, has a daughter now, and the kind of math is adding up in weird ways. It's making him go, wait, what? And so that's kind of the story I'm working on now. It sounds really like dark and depressing and stuff, but it's not. It's kind of a silly book, actually. Total diversions from this. And so, as far as where we can eat, with regard to that, I'm okay just still going to hot dog places. That would be fine by me. I don't know what rock stars eat, like white bread and like M&M bowls of M&Ms with like all the orange M&Ms picked out of them because they can or something. So I don't know.
So I'm going to say Maria's fishbowl, but also we have another comment from the chat. When can we expect the next book? You have a public.
10 years. 10 years from now. No, I'm almost done with a draft of it, but it'll take a while, of course, to revise it and make some sense out of it, I think, and then find somebody who wants to publish it. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if there's publishers out there listening. All at me, right? But yeah, I mean, hopefully, you never know, but hopefully, not too long from now. I guess we'll find out. Well, thanks everyone, and like I said, enjoy some refreshments. Yeah, thank you.
You got also sweet, can't wait for it, and congrats. And from Your friend Dave Housley thanks Cap, great reading, great book.
Oh,